Hello and welcome to the third and final part of your first lecture, and this is about the answer to Enclosure Limited, again narrated by Dr. Martin Roberts. Okay, so like I said, we're going to look at Enclosure Limited, and in essence what you've got is a company in real trouble. After only 6 months on sales of 4 million, it's losing £300,000, and obviously if you double that up for the full year, we're potentially losing up to £648,000. So what to do? Let's look at these figures again. Okay, so you've got this in Word, but I'm just showing you again so we can see what we're looking at. Like I said, we're at the half year point and we've got 4 million as our total sales so far. We're making contribution of £864,000 and our total costs are just on £1 million. So there you are. Overall, a little bit of interest and management fees, we're down at 300,000. So not great, to say the least. So let's see what we can do about it. Yeah, and bizarrely enough, the place to start is one of the most simplest techniques that I've shown you, and it's that of break even. And the things that you now must consider are 1, the overall margin of the company, and 2, the total fixed costs of the company. And that, like I say, will allow us to calculate a simple break even that might just help this company. Okay, first thing to do is pick up on the margin, otherwise known as the contribution to sales ratio, and all that you do is you can take the current 6 months figures. You can take the total contribution of 864,923 divided by the sales. Once you've got that calculation for completeness, you can leave it in your calculator, or you can times it by the 100, which will give you the percentage. That percentage is rounded to 2 decimal places, and that's the consistency I expect for things like phase tests and exams. Okay, so what this is saying, like the water bottle example, is that instead of per unit now, on average, for every pound in sales, this company is making 20 and a bit pence. Okay, so in terms of calculating the fixed costs or the overheads, this is incredibly straightforward. All you've got to do is multiply by 2. I think for there's a few things you could throw in, like the management fees and all that, but let's just keep it simple. Let's just take the 108,986 that you see as the sum of the first year, the first 6 months of the fixed costs, and multiply by 2. So this company, if everything stays consistent and fixed costs are as you would expect to be that straight line that you see in textbooks in relation to that commitment will potentially be all year long, then we've got total overheads of £2,179,372. Okay, now using break even, believe it or not, now that we know our margin, now that we know our fixed costs, it's incredibly easy now to work out ways in which this company can work to survive. Okay, so to break even, there you go. You take the fixed costs, you divide it by the margin, the average margin that we're running at, and what that gives you in your calculator, that number there is the turnover target that this company needs to survive. Okay. However, if you just double the sales, which are currently sitting at 4 and a bit million, is that, oops, they are only, if everything stays consistent, they are only really predicting sales of 8 million, so we're a long way away. We've got to find a way of increasing sales by 2 million in 6 months, in the way they're currently operating. That's going to be difficult. Now, you could say, we're doomed, give up, move away, move on, sell the company. Well, just let it go into administration would probably be the obvious answer. But this company never gave up hope. So what it did was try to look at things a little bit more differently. Okay? Because break even is quite a clever little technique. We could simply say that we times our losses that you see at the bottom with 300k and we're going to lose 600,000. That's kind of, you could just say that and say we're doomed, and let's use that as an incentive to sort this business out. But it doesn't really point you in the direction of where you need to go. Okay? Break even starts to think not just about costs, but also about sales. Okay? And you can create simple solutions. So what that allows us to do is we allow us to think about, well, can we gain more customers in the time that we've got? Can we raise our margins? To increase our customer base, we might have to invest more in our overheads. We're going to spend more on marketing. And then offsetting that, we might need to make more savings. And unfortunately, the easiest way to do things is to sack people. But doing that is a very dangerous game. As you damage morale, you'll lose efficiency because people aren't interested in producing the work that they're expected to do. And worse still, the wrong people that are vital to the organisation might have been there the longest and will quite happily take a very high redundancy payoff, which is not great for your company. You lose potentially experienced people. Okay, so let's use the technique. Let's think about, well, hang on a minute. We're running at 20%. Is there any way, what's the actual number that we need to run at to create a break-even scenario? Okay, so let's just say we're looking at the whole year. Obviously, we'd probably work more towards closing the gap, but let's keep it simple. Let's just use the whole year. Okay, we know what the overheads are going to be. We have 2 million. We know what the projected sales will be if everything stays the same and also is doubled. Okay, alright. So to cover the overheads with those potential total sales, our margin is going to be running at 25.66 as opposed to 20%. So therefore, what can we do? Is it possible that we can get the same level of sales, but by we increase our contribution by rising prices? Can we increase our price in any way? Can we make our product more attractive that people are prepared to pay on average 5% more? That's something that, here you go, instead of just trying to slash costs and wander around in the dark, is that you've got a specific target, a thing to go back to your salespeople with and get them round the drawing board and see, what can we do? Okay. In terms of variable costs, okay? Yeah, and I told you before, is be careful with this. There's a big cliche going around that your greatest asset in any industry is your people. And the first thing you do is come in and sack people. It's possibly not the right thing to do. Okay? So let's look at other things. Let's look at material costs. What's the wastage like? Again, we'll go through variances in level 5 again. And, you know, if you're not using your material correctly, then that could cost you a lot of money. Okay? Think about distribution. Are we consolidating loads? And what I mean by that is that sometimes you just send one tiny item up to Scotland, when ideally what you should do is put lots of product on that maybe stops at Newcastle on the way, stops elsewhere within the country on its route to Scotland, so that you save money. So there's lots of other ways that you can think to try and get your margin down. Your margin up. Okay, and then finally, yes, this is the best idea, is that you can actually use break-even analysis to have a very, very powerful message to the shop floor, to anybody really within the company, is that if we're running at 20%, what that is saying is that for every £5 in sales, we're covering £1 in overheads. So every £5 in sales at 20% will create £1 in contribution. Now if you spin that the other way, if you say that every £1 in overhead needs £5 in sales to pay for it, what that then means is that you can turn around to anybody who saves you £1 is, you've not saved me £1, you've saved me £5. And then suddenly, if you think about that multiplier, if you save somebody £500, you've not saved them £500, you've saved them in sales £2,500. So suddenly, though, that premise, that idea of break even, is a very, very powerful management tool. Okay, so break even, and this is where you got to get your head around with management accounting applications. Return on capital employed, break even, simple ideas, not difficult to calculate. What we're after and what you should start to think about is, yes, you need to, when you join a company, you'll have to be reliable and be able to calculate and communicate numbers with confidence, but ultimately they will see you as a graduate and they will see you as a future leader. Now, as a future leader, and this is what we want, is not only do the calculations, but we want you also to think about the internal and external implications of what you're calculating. Okay, and if you're able to do that and feel more confident at the end of these 12 weeks, I feel that it will be a job well done. Now, just to finish this off, is that number there is, well, sorry, those set of accounts is a true story. Okay, a long, long time ago in my future, I came in as FD of that particular company, and that's a very thinly disguised set of the original numbers, and I used exactly the techniques we've talked about, this idea of multiple break even, looking at just the average contribution for the total products, looked at the total overheads, and all of the previous that I've mentioned. I set everybody off thinking about how this company could be saved. And what I can tell you recently is that this company was sold for 120 million euros, or in British pounds 105.6 million. So hopefully it just shows you that just simple techniques, a bit of leadership, clarity in your communication, you can achieve great things in management accounting. So hopefully that's a good start, and let's move forward together with confidence.